As we've moved through this strange and chaotic season dealing with the pandemic, one of the things that we've been most concerned about at OU is making sure that people get through to the other side healthy, spiritually healthy, mentally healthy, physically healthy. And so we thought it would be important to invite one of our mental health care providers in to share with us some ways that we can be and remain mentally healthy during this season as we look toward the other side. So we've invited in Dr. Matt Campbell. Matt has been a practitioner, a counselor here in Oxford for 17 years and brings to us a lot of wisdom. Over 3 sessions, brief sessions, 15 to 20 minutes each, he's going to cover topics for us that will help us maintain a sense of control and health, that will help us deal with grief and the emotions that you and I are both struggling during this time. We're thankful for him and his work, and we know that it will be important for you to watch these sessions.
Hey, OU family. So happy to be here with you. I'm so honored to have the opportunity to talk to you about some things that I find really important for us in this time of COVID-19 and the changes that we're making and adjusting to and the different stresses that we're dealing with. Today, what we're going to be discussing has to do with our basic self-care and our social connection. Before I get too into those things specifically, one thing I'd like to do, just from a background point of view to tell you where I'm coming from, is to describe for you a theory or a model that I find really useful in terms of how we cope and how we deal with things and how that affects us emotionally. The model or theory is called Diathesis-stress model. Diathesis coming from the Greek term meaning predisposition. What this model describes is that each of us have a certain predisposition to different problems. Anxiety, depression, substance alcohol abuse, different issues, that we have this predisposition based upon our genetics, our family history, our early childhood experiences, and these things fill our cup to a certain level. So if this were anxiety, it raises it to a certain level, and that's pretty consistent. Additionally, what we have is we have stress that comes in. And so stress also comes into our life. And when that stress comes in, what we don't want to happen is for this cup to flow, to run over. This is one cup we don't want running over. Because when it does, that is when we fully get the experience of intense distress. In this case, it may be anxiety. And so what we're talking about is this part. And this is our coping. Because at any point in our life, we're dealing with stress. We're dealing with different challenges, sometimes more than others. And right now, we're dealing with an awful lot. And what our coping does is while the stress is coming in at sometimes, less steady stream, and right now it's coming in buckets. This helps so that not all of that gets in. Most of it comes off. The problem we're experiencing now has to do with the fact that so much of this part of our coping has been taken from us. So many of the things that we typically do in our daily life to try to manage and handle things, to get a sense of control, to get releases, many of those things we're not able to do. And so today, I'd like to talk to you in particular about how self-care and social connection relate to this. So to begin with, I want to focus on the basics of self-care. As humans, there are certain things that we are just built to do. I consider it our foundation. If we attend to our foundation, it's quite healthy. The flip side of that is that if we're not taking care of these basic self-care things, we can be doing amazing other things in our life and still struggle. So those things are, as humans, we were made to sleep about 7 to 9 hours at night. Sleep is something I'm hearing a lot about. I'm hearing about nightmares that people are having. I'm hearing about difficulty falling asleep. I'm also hearing about people sleeping a lot. We really want, as best we can, to get that sleep between 7 to 9 hours. There's some variability with people, but sleep is an incredibly, incredibly important part of our self-care. Having a schedule for our sleep is often quite helpful too, and a challenge right now as we don't have our normal daily events in daily life. Another thing that we're made to do is to move, to exercise. That can be a challenge. That is certainly something that we have to do ourselves. And please be clear with that. I hope to be clear myself that when I say exercise, I do not mean some extreme, fitness regimen, but getting out and walking is wonderful for us. It's what our bodies were made to do. And sitting in temperature controlled environments, sitting in cushy chairs, while comfortable, is not what we were made to do all the time. So making sure that we take some time to do that is important. As I mentioned walking outside. Spending time outside is quite helpful. Getting some sun exposure, obviously not too much. We don't want to get burnt. But making sure that we have some time outside, that we have that connection with nature is quite important. Another thing that sometimes people can have different feelings about is trying our best, within reason, of consuming things that come from the earth. Our bodies obviously are going to be able to process, going to benefit the most from things that are natural. That's not always the fun things. In fact, maybe it's not often the fun things, but that is how we're going to help ourselves the most to function best. And the last thing I want to mention in terms of the basic self-care is something that I want to speak about a bit more broadly. And that is that we are social animals. We are made to be around others. We're pack animals. We do best when we're with others. The thing about that right now is it's obviously quite a challenge. Our experiences right now socially are so unusual. We're being encouraged not to be around people. We desire that. We desire that connection, that contact, being with one another. Paradoxically, we also can have the experience, because of so much anxiety and worry and fear and the unknown, that often primes us so that we can have the paradoxical experience of being jumpy when we're around other people as well. Even though we want it, we can feel that tension and that jumpiness when we are in the presence of others, at the store, at other places that we may be. So right now, unfortunately, the part of that we simply can't do anything about and be responsible for our community is to be around groups of people, to do our normal social activities. And unfortunately, that is a part, for the time being, that we're going to need to accept. But that doesn't mean that we can't get this need, this basic self-care filled. One of the things that I have seen a great deal and I've had in my work has been the use of social networking, the conferencing techniques. Zoom is the platform that I use most frequently, FaceTime, things like that. We can also connect, obviously, through the phone, through writing one another. Another thing that I've absolutely loved seeing has been these drive-bys and different ways of celebrating things or expressing, care and concern to other people. On Saturday, I was part of one of those for my wife's cousin, and it was really, really special. It was a really wonderful experience to be one of many, many cars that were driving by to express their love and support as she was preparing to go for a medical procedure the next day. And the thing that stuck out to me the most in us driving by was how touched she was that you could see that that expression of care and concern and how that connection with so many people was so meaningful to her. Connection is still possible. And so, what does that mean? Well, to me, connecting with people is obviously through these different approaches that I mentioned, these different platforms, these different techniques. But connection also involves the ability for us to listen, for us to find ways to help one another. As I've said on other platforms, that's also part of our faith. I would say that even beyond that, it's part of just what we're supposed to do in terms of human behavior. We have always been in groups. People always had their roles and things that they did for one another. And that's how the community worked. I don't think it's any accident that when we do something for someone else, particularly when we can see the meaning it provided for them, that we experience a really positive emotional experience. I think that's because that's what we were made to do. And so at this time, I think that it's so important for us to find ways to reach out to others. Sometimes that's something really obvious. For Mary Margaret, it was lining up with other cars to tell her we loved her. But it can be other things as well. Maybe it's picking something up for people. Maybe it's finding other things to do for them, to assist them. And it can also be just listening. Listening is an art that we sometimes lose in our information-driven world. It can be difficult for us to allow ourselves to both express our genuine feelings to another person and also to hear it. These are things that we're often not doing, but yet are so powerful. I do evaluations for the Methodist Church, for prospective ministers as they go through the ordination process. And one thing I always mention to the ministers, or try to, is to be taking care of themselves, because what they have to provide in terms of their presence and their care and someone who truly listens to them is unfortunately in short supply often. And it's quite powerful for people to have someone who is really there to listen and to hear them. I think that one of the things for most of us that's difficult in just listening, I think that we have difficulty when we hear someone's genuine pain. And what it often leads us to want to do is fix it, is to give advice or just to try to give a reassurance. At times like this is a hard time. There are real difficulties, real anxieties that people are experiencing. And quite honestly, we really can't fix it for people quite often. It's important for us to be able to listen and to hear what others are saying in a non-judgmental way, because, our feelings are our feelings. They're not what we decide to feel, they're what we experience. And so allowing others to have that, to hear that, to feel important through being listened to and cared for is so important. And the other side is that it can also be uncomfortable to be the person sometimes who is being asked how you're doing, to be vulnerable to other people. Of course, being vulnerable, we want to have a trust in the other person. But one of the ways true human connection occurs is through shared vulnerability, through shared experiences. And that's what really connects us with one another. And so I'd encourage you to try to make that part of your day. Try to think of those things in those ways. The other part is don't wait. oftentimes we have a tendency to wait for others to come to us. Um, it's wonderful when that happens, but it's also so important for us as well as others that we make that effort to reach out to others and to show our care and concern. I hope these things are helpful. Um, and I really appreciate this time being able to spend with you.